Um, then the question becomes, should we be using this as a kind of money? Now, again, just a couple of minutes on this, and then you can tell me what your thoughts are on where you want to go.
So, again, he's expanding more about the thought processes of the scholars. What things do they consider? Even if Bitcoin, we understand what Bitcoin is, whether it's an asset, whether it's a receipt, whether it's an entry in a database, whether it's just pure money in digital form, which is my view. Whatever it is, should you even use it in the first place? And again, that's a valid point. Even if something is halal in principle, can we now turn around and make it money? Now, I think this is more of a broad question in the sense that if I wanted to do a transaction and I wanted to exchange knowledge for a bottle of water, for example, I can make that exchange. And nothing in the Sharia will stop me from making that exchange. But does that make the bottle of water money? In the sense that it is now a socially acceptable thing in the markets? Does that make sense? So I can exchange whatever for whatever, but I haven't made the bottle of water money. And maybe there might be a good reason not to, as on a government level, on a social level, make it money. But I think that, again, there are two views about money in the sense of what is its realm. Is it something which is a social construct, something which people as a collective kind of rally around and coalesce around? Or is it the realm of the government that dictates what money is? And I think this is where another problem Muslims have in grasping the hukum, the ruling of money. Some people think it is the realm of the governments, because technically speaking, since Islam, governments have issued currencies. We had the dinar and dirham. The government issued currencies. Then we had al-Marwan al-Hakam issued their own Islamic currency. And so for a long time, governments have been involved in the issuance of currency. But I don't believe that it was something. I believe that the issuance and the regulation of money by governments was a byproduct, was something that came later. Money existed before the governments came around. And governments only came around to help, you could say, regulate or standardize, that's a better word to say, to standardize an already existing system. So yeah, I could exchange in gold, but for me to go to the marketplace and always constantly have to weigh the gold and inspect the gold, it makes commerce long and, arduous, you could say, if that's the right word to use. Whereas as a government, I can help increase commerce by standardizing the transaction and making gold the exact same weight and shape and form, and therefore it removes the need to weigh and counterweigh and account. So these are you could say, it's almost like traffic lights. Governments put traffic lights to help facilitate driving, but if governments never existed, we'll still drive. Likewise, governments can facilitate transactions by standardizing money. But if there was no government or government issued coins, we would still transact. So that's why I'm of the view that money is an emergent property. And that's one of the beauties of Bitcoin, is that we see exactly that in action. We see the emergence of Bitcoin as money on a social level without the interference or involvement of government. And that's something we haven't seen for a very long time. It's almost like we're going back in time to like way, thousands of years, when money was first being born and how it was first being born. We've seen it all immediately in real time, just really rapidly. So, yeah. Anyway, moving on. That's my feedback on that point there.
There are Muslim scholars who have said, and these are very literalist ones, that only gold and silver can be money, and that indeed God created gold and silver to be money, right? And they have taken a very literalist position and an exclusive position and say that gold and silver is the only form. There's a very close connection with what the Austrians have said in the past on this, right?
So yeah, he's now listing off some of the opinions of the scholars. Again, keeping in line with how he started. He started off by laying out the foundation of what the scholars are thinking about, what are they looking at when they've passed their verdicts, and now he's listing off the verdicts themselves. What have the ulama said? One of the opinions is that Bitcoin, so that money can only be gold and silver. And they list off evidences for that. I would outright reject that opinion. And again, why do you reject that opinion? Why? Because there is no ayah or hadith which says one must use gold and all other forms of money must not be used. What we do find, however, is that Allah references wealth and uses dinar and dirham and dhahab and fidda or gold and silver. He references money in gold and silver, but that is more of a reason, more of an example of a demonstration of speaking to the people by what they know. And if that was what money was at their time, what else would Allah refer to as money? I mean, Allah wouldn't refer to paper money, pounds or dollars or whatever the money was in the past that wasn't gold and silver. Allah referenced that which was used at their time. The best money that was used at their time. Surely there are other forms of money like shells and beads, but that wasn't the best form of money. The gold was literally the best form and the standard, you could almost say. And it didn't matter where it came from, as in the word dinar and dirham suggests or doesn't suggest, it demonstrates that that was referenced in the currency of kuffar, of Europe even. So it doesn't matter where it came from or who issued it. The fact is that was what was used. So to say that because Allah referenced gold and silver and referenced that mankind loves the gold and the silver, that's the only way in which you can transact, I find that extremely weak. And there's nothing that suggests that. And this is the point here. This is the point we need to get. This is how you word it. Don't just think of it as money has to be gold and silver. Let's take it to the extreme. Let's look at what it really means. If you transact in anything but gold and silver, you are getting a sin. When you put it like that, then you have to say, ooh, what am I getting a sin for? As in Yawm al-Qiyamah, on the Day of Judgment, I'll be burned in hell for transacting other than gold and silver? Why? Do you get what I'm saying? So don't just look at it as, oh, gold money must be gold and silver. No, look at it for what it really means. By that opinion suggests that if you was to transact in anything but gold and silver, you are sinful. So
there are other scholars who've said that gold and silver can be money, and you cannot prohibit them being used as money because the Prophet, peace be upon him, used them as money, and you cannot prohibit what the Prophet permitted, right? We have those scholars who perhaps sit in the middle.
Second opinion, gold and silver can be used as money. And if anyone wants to say you can't, then they would say, but wait, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used gold and silver to transact in. So you can't prohibit it. But saying that gold and silver is prohibited as money doesn't mean gold and silver must be money. Or money must be gold and silver, sorry. And that is, I would suggest, as being the correct opinion. Because again, you can transact with anything. As long as the two things are halal. But to suggest that you are sinful if you don't use gold and silver, that is a bit extreme. And not to mention no evidence to suggest that.
And then there are those scholars who are perhaps the most liberal ones who say that we use the objectives of Sharia, justice, stability, and so forth, to judge what should be money. And any system which has low cost or lower cost, that has security, that has justice, safety, transparency, can be used.
So the third opinion, it's a bit hard to understand what's the difference between the third opinion and the second one if you just look at that. So he said that basically we look at the maqasid al-sharia, the intent of the sharia, the goals of the sharia, and whatever fulfills that goal of the sharia can be money. I mean, that's technically the same as what the second opinion was, because the second opinion said gold and silver can be money, but it doesn't have to be money. So therefore, other things could be money. And I guess these other things you would look at would be if it's useful for money, which is kind of the same as the third opinion. But I think what he's trying to get here is those who have this opinion, or those specifically who said that, have looked at other systems like fiat and looked at the printing of money and said because the money can be printed and it's useful and it can fulfill the goal of transactions, then it can be used money based on the intent of the Sharia. Now, It's a little sidestep. This issue of the maqasid al-sharia, it's sorry, let me just take a step back. So in Islam, we have the sharia, obviously, the Islamic law. And the evidence or laws or legal laws are established in Islam by evidence. From the evidences, what Allah said in the Quran, what His Messenger said in the Sunnah, consensus of the scholars, that kind of stuff. There are a few things that constitute evidence in Islam. One of those types of evidence is the Sharia. Is Qiyas. Sorry. Qiyas, analogy. So we have something which Allah did not specifically mention in the Quran or the Sunnah, and we wish to know the ruling of that thing, but we can find an analogy of something that Allah did speak about. So I'll give an example, and a bit of a loose example, because there is actually evidence to it from the text, but moving on. So like Allah mentioned, يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ. They ask you about khamr and gambling. Khamr often is translated as alcohol, but what it actually means is wine. It's like saying cider, or even wine itself. Wine is an alcoholic beverage made from grapes. Cider is an alcoholic beverage made from apples. So beer is an alcoholic beverage made from wheat and barley. So we have different names for the same alcoholic beverage, but based on its origin. So if Allah said they ask you about gambling and wine, one may think, okay, Allah's talking about wine. Allah's not talking about cider. And here's where one could use qiyas, analogy. Well, the reason why wine is prohibited is because it intoxicates. And that's the same thing in cider. So by qiyas, cider is included in that, although it wasn't mentioned by name. That's an example of qiyas, analogy. Now, maqasid al-sharia is the same as qiyas, except that it's rather than drawing an analogy on a specific thing. So I drew an analogy between cider and wine being a specific thing. Maqasid is drawing an analogy between, let's say, cider and the general intent of the sharia. So it's not really specific, it's more to do with the general intent of the sharia, which requires a bit of research to determine what is that intent and whether that intent can be the basis of an analogy or qiyas. Because of that now, we find today, and even in the past, when it was first brought to light, is that people use this word maqasid al-sharia to lump everything inside the sharia. And the reason why I do so is because it's a lot more harder to pinpoint exactly where you're coming from. With qiyas, however, I could say, look, I make qiyas of cider to wine, and I can look at the wine, I can analyze the wine, and I can determine whether the wine fits the analogy. Whereas maqasid is wider than that. I'm making analogy on a principle, a general understanding of the sharia, which is a lot more ambiguous, and therefore, I guess you find a lot of people of innovation and deviance, they would use, well, I'm not suggesting Shaykh is deviant, I'm just saying, but a lot of people deviants, they use maqasid to lump things in easily, to slide it in, to slip it in there, maqasid, and then we just accept it, because reality is to analyze this maqsid, we have to go quite deep in the evidences for this intent and draw the analogy and that kind of stuff. So whenever I hear maqsid, my point in saying this is whenever I hear the word maqasid or this intent of the sharia, I am very skeptical, because it is highly speculative. And it's very rarely, if not very difficult to get, I guess you could say, a definitive answer. I mean, anyway, the point is very broad. And because of that broadness, we find many things that have been lumped into the sharia. One can easily argue it shouldn't be. Like the case made for fiat. Yes, printing paper is cheaper and easier, and there's not less cost as regards gold, but then one could very easily argue that that's the point of using gold. It's not easy to produce, and therefore it regulates the supply and so on and so forth. Not to mention that riba, that fiat is based on riba, which is totally overlooked in this discussion. But the point is, this third opinion, it seems to be a third opinion because it seems to be grounded in maqasid al-sharia, and therefore it's almost like a precursor to the discussion of why we were allowed to use fiat. So that's a little basis there.
Right. And these ones tend more to support, they have even supported, for example, the fiat money system in the past by saying, look, it costs a lot of money to dig gold out of the earth. Why do we spend all this money when we can have a cheap system producing paper at very little cost? Right? So you have this range of opinions.
So, like I said, the only reason I can see that the second opinion and the third opinion is different is maybe because the third opinion is grounded in maqasid al-sharia, and therefore it opens up the door to almost anything to be used as long as it fulfills the intent of the sharia. But again, the reason why, one of the examples you can see why this use of the argument in this discussion, especially as it relates to fiat, is that it's looking at it from a very narrow view. Oh, if I can transact and it does the job. Ignoring the great harm that comes through the issuance of fiat, the management of fiat, and what fiat does to society in terms of being inflationary and the rest of it. So, anyway, let me continue. Our point is that the Shaykh Tarek has laid out kind of the groundwork for what scholars do when they decide what is halal and haram, the three different opinions he views around what money should be. And it's not talking about Bitcoin yet. It's just this is just talking about what money should be. And now we're going to move on. But I think you can guess that I'm more of the second view, or the second opinion, that gold and silver can be money, like anything can be money. And I guess you could say almost in a way agree with the third opinion, as long as it agrees with the maqasid al-sharia. But I guess my caveat would be as long as it actually agrees with the intent of the sharia, which means looking at it properly, because if you do the same with fiat and come to the conclusion that fiat is halal, which is maqasid al-sharia, then that's not looking at it properly, because we'll see anyway.